Socialism, Subverted Malevolence, by James P. Pearce. Once again, there is dangerous freedom to peaceful slavery concept at play. There are many dialectics that play out in real time, along with not being morally consumed by the alleged message. If it is a collective one, then it would be something that would make even Darwin blush. This division is one of supposed self-sacrifice from those that cry tyranny, but in truth, they are divided from the truth in Christ. Whether it be a conspiracy theory or another run-of-the-mill outrage tactic, it always seems that the collectivization is always a run-to-the-hills type of mentality. Those hills have eyes. That collectivization, whether it would be from the countryside or a bureaucratic oligarchy, everything is watched in a collective or divine sense. So, then where is the use of beating a dead horse with this socialism rhetoric? The use is in how the collectivization can be bought and sold for subverted malevolence, as pointed out on numerous occasions as an NGO, or something of the like in the form of a multinational corporation. The collectivization narrative really starts to break down once the multinational rhetoric gets brought up. All of the open society jargon is all of a sudden out the window. I am happy to see that, as in the case of border security in the United States versus somewhere that is heavily funded like Israel at the behest of the United States. All you have to do is follow the money. I don't even need to bring up a conspiracy theory for that one. So then why would there be a need to collectivize as supposed tolerant political factions that are made up of fascists and communists? It gives a different shade of red on all fronts. When that subverted malevolence comes in the form of an LGBTQ parade or something that is okay with BlackRock funding it, then it gets soaked up no matter what it is. This obviously leads back to the secular Israel trail. How awful it must be to see all those roads paved to that subversion. Is the common denominator always a certain group of people? This subverted malevolence does tend to lean that way. However, it is not always the case and is not always across the board on a consistent level. For a Christian, a better way to levy it would be to question ethics and pathology. Just as there is a spirit as to what everyone encounters throughout life, because we are both guarded and threatened by powers and principalities. That might have gotten a bit too esoteric of an answer, so I will rein it in a bit. If the collective good or bad, subjective, I know, is collectivizing against godly virtues, then the well will run dry. If the Christian virtues are emphasized based on an honest foundation, then we all should pray that it would be bountiful. So then why do people to call on God, if that collective secular Satanism shuns Him? It is because God is so obviously prevalent in our lives. They thought there would be flying cars by now in the mid-1950s. The supposed collective majority is still wondering if peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are racist. So, therefore, we get what we deserve. I know that is another bit of an esoteric stretch, but let me get into some meat and potatoes, something else that socialists are not fans of. The subverted malevolence comes in all forms of what could be placed or swapped out as a moral cause that is self-destructive and ultimately sacrilegious to the perceived stately order or the morally consumed culture that is just another version of empty nihilism. To no one's surprise, they either have zealous believers or they have people that turn back to the eternal logos that is everlasting righteousness. Yet that narrow path we all must walk, is not for all of us to walk, that is if we choose to deny it. As someone who has wrestled with this time and time again, I know what it feels like. Yet this is not a personal diatribe either, so back to the subverted malevolence. In the face of adversity, the narrow path or gate to heaven is conquering over the wide path to evil or hell. Those good intentions sure do pave the way to the latter, and not the former. This is why we must heed the words of the saints and the ones who teach us wisdom in all capacities that will help us discern keenly. This collectivization that causes the malevolence will be for God to judge what is in their hearts. This is why we have to pray for our enemies as well. This subverted malevolence, as in a form of socialism, or a malevolent social structure, is something that does lack any long-term sustainability. If you take the case of both East and West Rome, there is a prime example of an empire falling apart because of an embrace of secular and moral consumption in the West that had to shift over to very real collectivization of a Christ-centered civic life. This is where the truth of a very divine presence pronounces itself victorious. Yet, as malevolence always rears itself in the vices, this is where that supposed socialist structure will ultimately eat itself up alive, just like an Ouroboros, which is another pagan or satanic symbol, rather than a Christian one. Does this imposition make it so that it is impossible to get back to having Christ at the center of civic life? I do not think so, for if the supposed collective good is really more malevolent subversion, then what is the point of even paying any attention? And for that matter, if there is victory over death by death, then death to the world will always be exercised in heavy doses. So if the malevolence is a manifestation of those passions by people who think they can pull the wool over the eyes of any naive enough to constantly believe it, then the awakening might be ruder than what could ever be imagined. This is why God gives us strength, and this is why we have His armor as stewards of the true faith of the true God.